Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 104 of the Focus and Chill podcast. We're thrilled to be joined by Mike Knapp today. Mike is a tech innovator and serial entrepreneur with a track record of turning groundbreaking ideas into impactful products. Mike's career exemplifies innovation at scale. His unique blend of technical expertise and business acumen has driven success in both startups and tech giants. As a neurodivergent leader, Mike champions diversity in tech, inspiring audiences to harness unique perspectives for problem solving. With his insights on AI integration and future tech trends, Mike empowers organizations to navigate the rapidly evolving digital landscape, leaving audiences energized and equipped to drive meaningful change. Welcome to the show, Mike. So keen to start off by hearing about your journey with neurodiversity and maybe touching on the SMH article that you wrote.
Yeah, it was actually a big surprise to me to learn that I was neurodiverse. And I learned that last year when I was 43 years old, and it came a little bit out of left field. So the background to it is I left my job at Google. I really loved my job and I had built this new product, Google product, and we'd launched it. But I was really starting to not feel great. During COVID, I had lots of back-to-back meetings. I was the leader of this sort of team, and often I'd be the center of attention in all of the meetings. And after a few years of doing that, even though we had started to go back to the office, I just wasn't feeling great. I wasn't feeling myself. So I thought maybe I should just go back and try my hand at startups again. I was expecting to leave and feel really great, but actually it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. The physical burnout. I wasn't sleeping very well. I had insomnia. I was waking up early in the morning. I had really bad tinnitus. I had really intense brain fog, crippling anxiety. It felt like there was a tiger ready to eat me at all moments of the day. It just kept getting worse. It was really strange because I felt really positive in my mind, but my body just wasn't behaving itself. So I was going to the doctor saying, hey, what's wrong with me? I think there's something really wrong. And they did tests and they're like, no, everything's fine. But yeah, it just didn't get better. And so I went to see a psychologist about the anxiety. And as part of that, I made a joke to her. I was like, oh, someone mentioned the other day that I could be on the spectrum. Like, isn't that funny? And she didn't laugh. She just got really curious. She's like, oh, you ever into that? And just the way she said it, I was just like, oh no. I think that she thinks that I'm like on the spectrum. And yeah, I did some research. I found the monotropism test or diagnostic and did that. And yeah, I was like more monotropic than most autistic people. And so I looked into it some more and then did the formal diagnosis. So it was a bit of a journey, but learning that has been massive. My whole worldview has like massively changed for my whole life, effectively.
That experience of going through burnout sounds really challenging, but it sounds like it ended in you being able to come up with a much greater awareness of yourself through that process. Has the burnout gotten better since having that realization?
Yeah, it's gotten better to a degree. I wouldn't say I'm fully back to normal, I think that I've still got a lot of work to do there, but it's good that I've got this awareness now of what the issue is. I think previously I was just thinking like, oh, I'm getting a little bit older. Maybe I can't keep up as much or something like that. But I was really ignoring the burnout, the really heavy burnout symptoms. It's not necessarily my age. I felt like a 90-year-old man. Yeah, it was just the burnout and my brain basically just melting down from years of me not looking after myself. We can go into more detail of like why I think that happened, but I definitely am on sort of the road to recovery. And I think the learning about my very unique brain has been massively helpful for that.
Mike, I just wanted to ask you, because you and I are actually the same age. I'm 41. And so one of the things that I've been discovering as well is that my brain doesn't quite work like other people's. And I also feel like I'm slowing down, but like part of me like is wondering like, hey, I know fluid intelligence, it starts declining, I think when you're in your early 30s or mid 30s or something like that. So I just thought it was a natural, gracefully aging type of process. How did you know it was time to actually take control of this side of your life rather than just accepting the stories that we're told?
Well, I think my plan for dealing with it was to work by myself, because I thought, well, if I don't have to do video calls anymore, because I was often managing people in different time zones. So I thought working for myself, that's going to solve the problem. I'm going to be able to just do coding or projects. And it turned out that didn't fully help the problem in my sort of situation. And if anything, I think, I really miss working with teams of people and working on problems together, because I think that's actually how you do great work. And I don't feel like I've actually lost any abilities. My brain feels very positive. And I think now I'm actually at the point where I've got lots of skills, and actually I think I'm actually performing at a higher level, or I'm able to think more deeply about certain problems. I'm not worried about the work side of things, I think, but certainly when you're going through burnout and you've got really intense brain fog, you've got sort of skills regression, temporary skills regression, you've got anxiety, you've got other symptoms, it's very, very hard to operate. Focusing a little bit more on my health and knowing how my brain works and giving myself a little bit more time for certain things, I think that's been really useful. Whereas previously, I just felt a relatively intelligent, normal person with a stock standard issue brain, and I could just keep pushing myself. Unfortunately, if you have autism in particular, what you consider to be giving 100% of yourself to a job is what other people might think is like giving 150% to a job. And so, for me, learning that I don't need to follow every thread. I don't need to be on top of every single detail. There comes a time when you should close your laptop and say that's enough for the day. And so I was sharing just before we started taping that, I recently accepted it, which I'm really excited about, joining a team again. And I'm looking forward to working in a more sustainable way, but hopefully in a way that allows me to bring out the part of my brain that has certain superpowers and applying that to the team and the role.
Yeah, and I'm sure with the learnings from the previous roles, it will be different. I think for my own, the burnouts that I've been through, it has been really linked to what you described of giving too much and not having a shut off at the end, because work is my special interest. And I'm very happy to keep working until 10 o'clock at night, but it turns out that it's not good for my body to keep doing that. Is that sort of what you were alluding to before in terms of the potential causes for burnout? I'd be keen to go into that a bit more.
So I've got some theories about it, but whether these are medically accurate, I can't make any sort of promises about that. My experience, though, is that it's so much harder if you're autistic to do video calls, because particularly if you're trying to read people's expressions and try to have emotional conversations, it's just so much harder if you're doing that on a flat 2D screen. And then during COVID, just like you said, work is one of my special interests. I think people is probably another special interest of mine, which is why I've been able to mask this long, somewhat successfully and sometimes not so successfully, because work is my special interest, well beyond what ordinary people will consider 100% of effort, to the point where I will basically do anything to make my project or team successful. And that can cause, over many years, when you're not really leaving the house, you don't have your routine. The ADHD side of my brain wasn't getting stimulated in the way it used to get stimulated, which was kind of a bit of a relaxing function in terms of balancing the autistic side. That plus trying to read, like give this performative energy all of the time in every single meeting, be the center of attention, having to read people and have these emotional conversations. If you just do that for too long and your brain is not really wired to do that naturally, I think that becomes a massive problem.
That sounds incredibly exhausting.
I think a lot of neurodiverse people really struggle with COVID. I think that's a theme that I've heard from talking to lots of neurodiverse people since I discovered I was neurodiverse.
Yeah, if you were in a role that involved a lot of communication with other people, then it would be terrible. It was actually great for me because I was working as an individual contributor as a coder, and it meant that I didn't have to go into the office anymore and deal with all of the extra emotional baggage that normally comes with it. But I totally hear what you're saying there, that if you're in back-to-back meetings all day, then it absolutely sucks.
I mean, I love people and I love meetings and I love collaborating, but I love doing that in person. Yeah, my job that I'm about to go into is actually a remote job. So that's something I'm going to have to really manage. But yeah, I know for myself, like I need probably like 2 to 3 hours a day where I'm doing like my own work. If it's the case that every single meeting is a video call, that becomes extremely tiring.
Definitely. Could you talk about the experience as well, being the co-founder of Shoes of Prey, which I imagine you kind of can't really turn off in that situation, because I believe you took investment and Shoes of Prey did pretty well. So it would have been very hard to pull away at that point. And did you then apply that mindset to the things that followed as well?
I think Shoes of Prey was a little bit easier because I was, for the most part, single. I was younger, and a lot of it was in person. It wasn't back-to-back sort of video calls. For a period of time, I lived in China, about 3 years, building a shoe factory, which is really great fun. And I was there with my brother and his now wife and another good friend who was an employee as well. We had a ball. Like, we would often be working 6-7 days a week, often till late. But yeah, we were just having a lot of fun, like building the factory and learning. I didn't really have the same issues with Shoes of Prey. Maybe I got a little bit stressed sometimes, but it wasn't like sort of chronic burnout. I've been able to go through most of my life until very recently. I think the other thing that was different is that, 2 weeks after I left my job at Google, because I wasn't feeling great, my wife discovered she was pregnant. And it's also been the challenge of having our first child and all of the things that come along with that, the lack of sleep, and also the financial concern, like, how am I going to support the family? When she was off work, she took some months of unpaid leave. So there was a lot of extra stress that came with that big life moment as well. My time is not entirely my own anymore, so I can't just grind it out on the weekends. Like, I need to take my daughter to the park or do something else. So yeah, that's definitely an extra layer of complexity.
So Mike, you mentioned that you're about to take on a new role. I'm not sure how much you can say about what's exciting you about it, but maybe you could say a little bit more about this transition from working for yourself to preparing to, I guess, work for someone else. Could you tell us a little bit more about the emotions around that and the logistics perhaps as well?
Yeah. So the role is AI related. It's very much linked to transitioning the country to a more renewable future. So that's kind of really exciting. I'm feeling very excited by the mission of what they're trying to do and how that connects to my own personal values and what I want to see change in the world. So that's massively motivating for me. But then also, I really miss working with great people. I was lucky to work at Google most recently with an incredible group of people, and I really miss that deep collaboration and shared journey. I'm excited to get back to that. The last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of research in AI, fine-tuning my own models, building internal tools for myself, and really learning a lot about the technology. So I'm excited to apply that to a real world application now.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I guess I'm in a similar boat to you, about 6 months behind you, I think, because I'm probably going to be working for someone else sometime this year as well, transitioning from working for myself. And also having a lot of fun tinkering with LLMs and stringing all these different components together to create this Frankenstein monster. Are there any particular side projects that you're particularly excited about putting together?
I made an image model for a company that they do retail design. And I put together a model that allowed them to basically visualize new ideas, and out comes a really nice conceptual image. That was really fun. I don't know if they're using it in production. It was weird because, sometimes when I present these things to creative people, they're like, oh, that's really interesting and cool. But actually, we enjoy the creative process and we want to keep doing it ourselves. That was one that I really enjoyed working on. And then recently, I haven't actually built anything cool with it, but similar to you, playing around with LLMs and seeing how you fine tune them and creating data sets. I haven't actually built anything that's worthy of talking about.
And on the side, while we're waiting for him, I've been playing around with getting a systematic review as in a literature review powered by LLMs. So I have to find papers for my PhD. It's been quite hard finding them manually. So I've got working today to pull down a few thousand papers off Semantic Scholar and then do some basic text processing, looking for keywords, and then put it through GPT for it. It's actually worked quite well. But I then need to figure out how to parse the full text because I don't want to put all of that into an LLM.
Have you played around with Notebook much?
No.
The free version allows you to put in like 50 sources. Like apparently its context window is the size of like 10 Harry Potter books or something like that. It's something ridiculous. It's not quite the 1,000 that you're thinking of. I'm not sure what the paid plan gives you, but the free plan gives you about 50. So you could potentially put like the 50 foundational sources in there and go from there.
So we were going to move on to the next question, which is to ask what your other hobbies are when you're not working. And imagine some of it is colored by having a new family member.
Yeah. What are my other hobbies? So I wouldn't say I have a lot of hobbies actually beyond work and family life. I think previously I did improv comedy. I did all sort of 6 levels of improv. And I really love that. It's probably something I might try to get back into once I start working again. But the last 2 years, I haven't really had a lot of hobbies. It's just been focusing on, I guess, recovering and family life and a little bit of work. The last bit has been giving speeches about AI. So I was in Melbourne giving a speech about AI to a group of online retailers and a little bit of consulting. But other than that, it's basically family time.
Improv comedy would be really good for the ADHD part of the brain.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I've learned so much from improv about teamwork. It's actually really about communication and teamwork. I'm not particularly funny, but the teamwork part is really cool. Like when you're on a stage and you're looking at someone and you've got to come up with a really interesting idea, all you can do is be a good teammate and just respond honestly and positively to whatever they say or whatever they want to talk about. Yeah, it's such a great skill for life and business to be able to yes and what someone else is doing. That's the part of improv that I really like.
I probably should try doing improv because I've heard about the yes and principle and I get it in theory and it's such a good idea. But I find the feedback that I got from my most recent performance review was, Jeremy, you do a great job at challenging people, that maybe I could do it in a yes and way. You're wrong. This is a bit of a...
And it's a real skill, and letting go of this idea that we have the best idea. There's a kind of saying in improv, if you don't know who the asshole is, it's you. Understand? That's always a good one to keep in mind. And what's cool is if you explore other people's ideas, it doesn't mean you have to, in a work context, go and implement that thing. But if you listen to people and incorporate their ideas, then they feel a lot more bought into whatever it is that you decide together to end up executing. That's a philosophy that I've taken from improv and try to apply in my everyday life. Although my wife might say I don't apply it all. Well, all the time, but I try.
Yeah. I guess it's a case of asking her to accept all offers then, isn't it? It's like, hey, I'm trying to... It's the improv principle.
Yes.
So, Mike, we were talking about earlier in the conversation about how if there was anything you could do to make your team or project be successful, you would try and do it. And that was ultimately not sustainable for you. I guess there's probably a lot of people in a similar position to you where they are reinforced for that kind of attitude. Like they might say, Mike, he'll put his body on the line to get the project over the line, and you'll get socially reinforced for it. And to kind of take your foot off the gas, like you might feel like you're letting people down. What advice would you give to someone that was in that position where they're like going, people are relying on me, I just can't take my foot off the gas here, and it's also not sustainable for me?
I think that's a good question. And it's something that I want to really think about as I re-enter the workforce, is like how to do this effectively. I think a lot of the story that I was telling myself about being in every meeting, for example, the story I was telling myself is, if I'm not in that meeting, I might miss an action item and I might let the team down. But sometimes the team doesn't really want you in that meeting because like they just want to get on with it, right? So I think just being really conscious of those stories that we're telling ourselves about what participating at the max level, is that really required? So another thing is, like, I would always try to get to inbox 0 every single day. When you're at a big tech company, you're just drinking from the fire hose in terms of information and being CC'd on every little minor detail. And so I think having a little bit more of a big picture view of what are the key areas that you need to contribute to versus what are the other things that you can give responsibility to others to take over and lead.
Yeah, so it sounds like the mode that you were in was focusing on the details and basically trying to nail every single detail. Whereas what if you were to zoom out and think about, okay, well, this is made up of a whole bunch of details that I couldn't possibly do myself. How about I delegate some of these things? How about I let some of these details slide because some of them aren't super important and they'll take focus away from these really critical things? Is that fair to say what the approach was like?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's another element too, which is I have a healthy skepticism of the status quo, and often I want to move a project or a team in a really kind of exciting frontier direction. And I think what I've reflected on the last 2 years is like, sometimes that's a good thing and you should move the team in that sort of frontier direction. But other times, depending on the inertia of the organization you're dealing with, sometimes that's actually like a death march. If you try to move too aggressively in a way that is contrary to the way the organization thinks and behaves. Yeah, I think neurodiverse people can have these big ambitions and these big goals to change the world. And sometimes that's good and positive, and sometimes that's going to actually just damage your health and maybe burn your team out as well. So I think that's something that's an equation I want to think more carefully about in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. I think also when you're talking about, marching your team off in a different direction, it is a little bit of a tough balance, I imagine, because sometimes you're encouraged to take those different directions. So like you're more innovative and you're thinking outside the box and all those great corporatisms. But on the other hand, if you do it too much, you're not seen as a team player. You're just kind of like seen as you're going rogue. Do you have any particular heuristics or heuristics or principles that you might have used to, I guess, when you get to a decision point to basically say like, okay, I'm probably going too far off track here. I should probably bring it back. Or, you know what, I'm too stagnant here. I need to probably shake things up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the kind of organization you're in. If you're in a startup, you have to push in an aggressive direction. But when you're working for a really large sort of multinational tech company and you're trying to solve the customer's problems, a customer here can be an internal stakeholder, it can be an external user or customer. I think it's always good to really understand what the customer needs and go after solving the biggest and hardest and most painful problems. But even then, sometimes you can be too ambitious in terms of trying to create this like perfect solution. You're trying to play 4D chess. And whereas maybe a simpler strategy or maybe a less exciting strategy would be the best course of action for the company to take rather than something that's like really innovative and new and cool. I think that's a realization that I've had later in my career. When I was younger, I always wanted to do the really cool frontier things. Sometimes, and this advice is more for when you're working in a really large organization, sometimes that's not always the best strategy in terms of actually solving the customer's problem. You might actually overcomplicate your solution and your execution. You should maybe think about simpler ways to tackle that problem.
I'm keen to dig into the large organization situation because that's where I sit and I feel very uncomfortable in this environment. Used to working for startups, and I think I find it easier to navigate because there's fewer layers of hierarchy and less stakeholders to manage. Do you have a preference yourself in terms of big versus large? And do you have any advice for particularly autistic people who might struggle to navigate and understand unwritten social laws?
Yeah, that's a good question. I loved working at Google because I felt very much at home at Google. You're a kin there that I could really get along with. And a lot of people think Google, it was kind of funny when I wrote the Sydney Morning Herald article, like a senior person like called me up, which was really nice, and he had a chat about it. And he's like, oh, Mike, I don't think that you're on the spectrum at all. Like, you're just like a normal person. You're just like everyone else here, which was kind of funny because my psychiatrist had said, well, the first clue that you're neurodiverse is that you worked at Google. So I will say that in the UK, there was a study, and it was about 500 people. Over 50% of people in tech companies in the UK in the study reported that they identified as being neurodiverse. So I think it is something that happens in sort of like large tech and creative industries. But to come back to your question about navigating that or what my preference is, I think it's less about the size of the company and it's more about the operating philosophy and culture of the company that is more important. You can probably have very large, highly technical and neuro-friendly environments that are incredibly hierarchical that a neurotypical person might struggle with the way decisions are made, but a neurodiverse person might actually find that a really great company to work at. And inversely, a really small company may not be a perfect match for someone who's neurodiverse for the opposite reason. But so I don't think there's like a one size fits all. I think it's more of a case of, does this organization sort of align with my values? Does the culture sort of suit my working style? And I think those are things that I'd never really thought about. I just thought, well, oh, I can work in any company. I can on any team. But I think there's going to be certain teams and certain companies where you feel at home and you feel like you can bring your whole self to work and you don't feel judged for saying, hey, I want to just put my headphones on and crank out some code for 3 hours, because everyone's going to sort of understand that. I think it's very dependent on the organization.
Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actual takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
We're back from our break. I've done some navel gazing about what type of company I want to work at. And I'm ready to now ask Mike about your morning routine and how that has changed over time, especially with the arrival of your new member of the family.
Yeah. When I was younger and I didn't have a baby to look after, I definitely gone through periods where I have been very obsessive about my morning routine, meditating, journaling, going to the gym, going for a walk. And I'd have an app that would track all of those things. I think that I've really struggled over the last 2 years to be consistent with that morning routine, just because the morning is so variable now. Sometimes our daughter will wake up at 2 a.m. and she may not go back to sleep for another 2 hours, and then she might go up again at 5, and we have to get her off to school. So yeah, it's very, very hard. And so sometimes by the time I get to sit down, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I kind of feel like there's an urgency to do something rather than take time to actually go through a morning routine. So that's been a real struggle. Recently, I've been getting back into journaling, which I find extremely helpful. So just following the artist's way, journal 750 words every day. And yeah, that's really good when I get a chance to do that. And then, yeah, recently we've been trying to get back into meditating at least 20 minutes a day in the morning. I think I'm going to be sort of visiting my morning routine in a little bit more detail. Like I think I have fallen off the wagon a little bit in terms of having a consistent one. One really interesting thing that came out of the diagnosis and then some of the counseling that came after that is maybe being too obsessive about a morning routine for me wasn't always a healthy thing, because I always felt like I had to tick off every single item and I didn't feel like successful if I didn't do that. So if I didn't do meditating, journaling, running, swimming, eating healthy, like all the things, then I would feel like I hadn't started the day well. And so I think a part of an autistic brain where we want to tick everything off, we want to get everything perfect. My psychologist said, hey, is that actually helping you or is that hurting you? So that was a really great insight. And I had become less stringent about morning routines, but at the same time, I think I also want to develop a bit more of a morning routine again that's maybe a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, I hear you. My wife is pregnant with a baby,
Oh,
so
congrats.
I'm anticipating my routine being blown up. And I think that way of thinking about it in terms of not seeing myself as a failure if I don't do every single thing on the list and coming up with a minimum viable morning routine. I think I'll have to come to that point too.
Yes, exactly. I used to work out 3 times a week, and now I'm lucky if I go on 3 walks a week. And I would like to do more, but I'm not really sure how to do that. So yeah, always keen for more tips if you've got any.
I'll tell you after I'm at the stage.
For you for now. Yeah.
That's it. I don't see any dependence in my near future either, so I'll withhold the advice. So instead, I'll ask you, Mike, a little bit more about your evening routine. Is it similarly variable, or do you get a little bit more stability at night?
No, it's also very variable and depends a lot on what our daughter wants to do. Sometimes she comes home and recently she's really into trains and like she'll want to go on the train. We live very close to a tram stop. That's kind of fun. Actually, that's where I'm getting a little bit of exercise too. If we go on the train, then we end up at a park and then we can sort of walk around and walk home again. So I think trying to combine it with family time is a good way to do it. So my wife and I, this is actually kind of a cool tip. My wife works and I've been at home working as well, trying to work. We were really struggling to get dinner on the table because my wife would come home and it'd be like 5:30. I would have picked up Hannah, but it was a bit of a struggle then to feed her before she was really hungry. So what we have done is we have a meal kit that comes 3 times a week, and we really like that. And so what I will do is prepare all of the ingredients. So do all the chopping and make the sauces and get everything ready and marinated or whatever needs to happen. And then I'll go and pick up my daughter and then bring her back. And then by the time I've come back, my wife's come, she's like cooked everything. By the time we come back, it's all ready and we sit down and eat. So that's been a real game changer. And I've loved it because I've got more experience with cooking and learning more about different flavors. So that's been really practical, and it just makes the whole night go a lot easier. And then it gets a little bit more complicated, like after that, in terms of bedtime routines. That's a constant source of anxiety because at the moment, my daughter is not going to sleep until sort of 10 o'clock at night. So yeah, there's a period of, from 8 till 10 or 7:30 till 10 where we're trying to get her to go to sleep. But yeah, that can be a bit of a source of anxiety and frustration for both of us. It's really hard. I think, in the early years when you've got a kid, you really kind of have to throw out any ideas of going back to your desk and working beyond 5 o'clock, because often you'll be next to your child and falling asleep, and then you're just too tired. You just have to go to bed. So yeah, it's a real challenge.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm anticipating that in my future and to probably align my life in that way that I won't take on too much in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think if you can make it so that you're getting the things that you want to achieve as a complement to doing whatever it is you need to do with your child, that's kind of what works well. I wouldn't say I'm particularly successful at that yet, but I'm definitely trying to move in that direction.
If people want to book you for a speaking gig or connect with you in some way, what's the best place for them to do that?
The best place is probably to have a look at the website. I've got a little website where I've got a speaking kit and some other projects. So yeah, that's mikeknapp.xyz.
Do you have any final words to ask for our audience?
Yes, please.
Do you have that one, Jess?
Sure, I'll ask it. Do you have any tips for having high quality sleep?
Yeah, so sleep has been a real issue for me since about 2020. In 2020, I was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea and prescribed a CPAP machine. I was incredibly tired during the day and went to get the study, and then that was found to be the cause. That definitely helps a little bit. It doesn't fully solve the problem, but for me, I think for a lot of people, it does fully solve the problem, but for me, it doesn't. One really interesting thing is I went to do a sleep study a few years ago in a hospital where I wore the CPAP machine during the night. And the specialist said, "Oh, it's very interesting because you still have sleep apnea even if you're wearing the machine," which is very strange. And since learning about neurodiversity, if you look on Reddit and the stories of people, particularly on like r/autism, there's a lot of people that have kind of similar stories about having these sleep issues, particularly sleep apnea and sleep disturbance. So, and I don't think it's a particularly well-studied area. And I went to speak to one specialist and I said, "Hey, what's the link between sleep apnea and autism?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm not really aware of any link at all," which seems to be very different to what you read from the lived experience of people that have had an autism diagnosis, or at least have self-diagnosed. So that's a real tricky one for me. And so, yeah, I take some like supplements for that. I try to get into bed at a reasonable hour and to do Sudoku puzzles, actually, like try and calm my brain down. But I would still say that it's not great. And then, yeah, having a kid that's waking up during the night, that's not ever helpful either. So yeah, it's something I want to improve, but I don't have a magic bullet, unfortunately.
That is really interesting that you mentioned that, because I actually yesterday went and got the results from my sleep study, and similar kind of finding that I'm not overweight and I don't have high blood pressure or any of the other markers that you would typically associate with sleep apnea. That's still an issue. So I'm going to do the mouth taping first, and then after that, might graduate into a CPAP machine.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. No, great. Well, best of luck. It's good to have like finally some answers and be able to sort of move in a positive direction.
We can actually just wrap the show there if you like. But if you do have any final words or any plugs you want to do before we wrap up, we could do that, or we could just wrap it there. What do you feel like?
I could maybe say something at the end. Yeah, maybe get some ideas. Yeah.
No pressure at all. Go.
Yeah. Do you want to ask a question and then I'll...
Yeah, sure thing.
Yep.
So Mike, it's been wonderful having you on. Do you have any final words or ask for our audience?
I think the one thing that I've learned personally through this journey is that to be really mindful of the people around you, their own unique neurology. I think that I'm really sensitive now to people who say, oh, this person is like not very nice, or that I don't like them, or they're an asshole, because I think we all have moments, and sometimes people's neurology can actually be very different to yours. And I think having that greater appreciation of how different brains work, if you have people that might be on the spectrum that are nonverbal, for example, and other people might think that they're being rude, but actually that's just kind of how their brain works. They're not trying to be rude. And so for me, that has been like a massive unlock in terms of like how I think about the world and how I think about other people and how I think about other brains. I think if we can all have more compassion for each other and each other's brains, and also our own brains, instead of internalizing some ableism about what we can and can't do, to have more compassion for ourselves and to give ourselves a bit more of a break sometimes, I think the world will be a happier, nicer place.
Thanks, Mike.
It's wonderful
That's a really nice
to talk to you both. Yeah, no, cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.